Good evening, everyone. Our mics are on. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay, who's mic? Okay, I'd like to call to order. Well, first of all, the first 15 minutes of our meeting we usually have for open mic. So if anyone here that has not put in their name to speak to council in writing or in one of these sheets that are back there, you're welcome to come up and address council. We'd just like to know your name. We'd like to tell you, though, if it's something we're going to talk about on the agenda, we can wait till that occurs. So this would just be if you have an announcement or just would like to talk to city council, I'd open it up for the first 15 minutes, and if nobody does, we'll go on to the regular meeting. So mic's available if you'd like to address us. Well, that met with a lot of resolve, didn't it? Okay. Then I'd like to call to order the regular city council meeting for January the 16th, 2018. Could I, it's called to order, so could I have the invocation from Greg Swearington at this time? Would you rise?
Lord, once again, we just ask for your blessing over this great city, and we just look forward to this new year, all that you have for us. And we just ask that you would go before the plans that this commission has and all that the events that are taking place. We just ask for your blessings upon those. We ask that this would be more peace in this city, that there would be more reconciliation to people coming together, and that walls would break down and hostilities would subside, and that your presence here would grow. And so we just thank you for this great city. We thank you for all you're doing. We thank you for the wisdom that you give this council. And we just look forward to this new year. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Trotman.
Here.
Councilmember Smith. Here. Gonzalez.
Here.
Schumacher.
Here.
Gill. Here. Hamrick.
Here.
Jaquez.
Here.
And Meisner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, are there any requests to speak to council?
We have two written requests to speak to council. The first one's Sandra Atencio. She wants to speak to council in regard to safety at the corner of 12th and Main. Sandra, if you can come to the podium.
This, I feel, is a big concern. The corner of 12th and Main is right there by my coffee shop in front of the middle school. And the issue that I've always seen there is with the students trying to safely go across Main Street, and traffic doesn't really slow up there. We occasionally have a police officer there, but not always. And so I know that it was brought to my attention that by Adam Lancaster, that the city was considering doing those bump out things there. Personally, I feel that all that's going to create is more safety concerns and be more hazardous than it will be helpful. I've also spoken with, other businesses in the area. I spoke to the principal. His concern was that they're going to be tearing down the old middle school. And so if we spend $200,000 or whatever it is to do those bump outs, we could very easily do a four-way stop there, add 2 stop signs for $200. Why spend that amount of money, whatever it takes to do those things with the flower boxes? They're very attractive, but they're not practical on that corner. We have several four-way stops in the county and in the city, and guess what? We never have accidents at those four-way stops. People honor them. I've been out there watering my flowers and stuff and seen people come up on these kids who are in the crosswalk and lay on their horns. These kids are just simply trying to get from point A to point B. They're legally crossing the street in the crosswalk. It's dangerous. We have seen kids get bumped that are walking, and people are just trying to get across Main Street. And so it's a huge issue as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that concerns us, me and the other business owners, they brought up, they're like, well, what about if there's a fire down there? Can a big fire truck get around the corner if need be? So that was an issue. I have seen and been in that line where cars are backed up for as long as 2, possibly more blocks north of Main Street on 12th Street, waiting to get across Main Street. At lunchtime, it's a huge issue. You've got the high schoolers trying to get to Sonic or Wendy's, for their lunch, and they're trying to shoot across Main Street, and there's traffic going up and down Main Street from east to west, and so the people trying to go from north to south or south to north have a long waiting period. Every other school, like Washington School, has a 4-way stop. There's a 4-way stop at Central and Field Avenue. There's a 4-way stop at Reynolds and East Main Street. That hasn't been there that long. And people honor those 4-way stops. They know what to do when they get there. They stop. And so I would like to see the council consider putting in 2 stop signs at a cost of about $200 opposed to whatever those bump outs cost. And also, so when they when they tear down the current middle school and go to build the new one, then all of a sudden, if you were to put that those bump out things out there, that's 4 of those, and I don't know what they cost each, but I know it's a lot more than a stop sign. And so what's going to happen to those? They're going to tear those out, and now we're going to be out that money and have to do it again? It just, to me, it makes more sense to put in a couple of stop signs.
Okay.
People will get used to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we really have bump outs scheduled for those corners?
Yes, we have a design for Main Street there on those 2 blocks that are similar to what we have downtown, not exactly the same, but similar. It's a Safe Routes to School project that we're doing with CDOT. Its design is complete, it's in clearance phase with CDOT, and is planned for construction this summer.
Okay. Do we have a copy of that plan?
I can make it available. Sure.
Okay.
This is the first negative I've heard on the whole project from the area. The business owners, we've extensively talked to the business owners where their parking is impacted in the 1200 block and 1300 block. And we've just recently talked to the school district and they said what we're planning on doing will be just fine with the new school.
Could you put a 4-way stop sign there?
No, we've checked warrants on that in the past. It doesn't meet the warrant for a 4-way stop.
Okay.
And Adam, can you clarify on the bump outs are they smaller than what would be seen downtown?
No, they would be similar size. Yep.
And do they meet the requirements for fire trucks?
Yes, they do.
And can you expound further the importance of those bump outs and how it creates a smaller distance?
So when we did the
for
safety
people
study, so when we did the safety study for the middle school, one of the primary concern we found were 2. One was vision for the pedestrians and the vehicles to the pedestrians. That's one of the purposes of the bump outs, is it shortens the walking distance for the pedestrian and brings them closer to the drivers so the drivers can see them. The second is the traffic calming. The biggest problem we found there was speeding. So the bump outs are the traffic calmer. We're eliminating some pavement width. So we're going to slow vehicles and put the children where they can be seen by the motorist. A lot of times they're standing where they're supposed to on the corner. The motorists don't even see them until they're in the middle of the street, and then it's too late.
What would be the requirement to have stop signs there?
So there's a number of conditions that have to be met for a warrant. A lot of it has to do with equal volumes of traffic on both sides, both legs of the intersection. So like I said, when we went through the safety study, it didn't meet those conditions.
So a study was conducted in
Yes.
consideration?
Yep.
When was the study done? Was it done when it's really, really busy there? Because, I am there every day.
Yeah, it's done for a 7-day cycle, 24-hour cycles each day, and then we pick peak periods on when we see the traffic.
Was it done during school year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I will say this, Sandy, I have a bad intersection at 5th and Macon, and they don't stop at 4-way stops.
Really?
I've been hit there by a car, and they don't stop. It's not necessarily an essence of traffic control, it's the ignorance of our drivers in the city that just don't stop.
That's part of it.
And,
We have a huge volume, though.
Yes.
Right there where I'm talking about, at lunchtime, when the kids get out of school and
Yeah.
and the high schoolers, this is where the big issue is. I see, I can just visualize this. you have those bump outs there, those kids are gonna treat it like a gondola chute. Man, they're gonna try to, get
Yep.
through there. And the thing is too, if, I don't know how many of you drive downtown and actually go across the street. In order to see past the parked cars, you literally have to cover up the crosswalk.
Yeah.
In order to see, because if you don't, then your front end of your car could get taken off.
Yeah,
I-
I'm out
I
there,
think-
especially.
It might be aesthetically pleasing, but I
Especially
don't know if it's
summertime, I go
practical.
out and help.
It's not an issue of aesthetics, it's an issue of getting kids actually
Safety.
across the street more safely based on data and experience with other schools.
It's
and-
safety.
I've been out there and seen cars honk at these kids. I had one kid that just about, I swear he just about fainted, and he was in the crosswalk, and this big four-wheel drive pickup truck was coming down Main Street, got right on him, pushed on and put on his brakes, and then blared the horn at him. And when the kid came over, I'm out there watering plants. When he came over, I said, honey, don't worry, you were in the right. You were legally crossing the street. However, what good's that gonna do if he gets hit?
Okay, we need to wrap this up. We're going a little
Yeah.
long. Adam, did you
Yeah,
want to say?
I'll be happy to swing by and talk to Sandy later this
Okay.
week and go over the plans with her.
Let's do that.
We can talk about
All
it.
right. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Next.
Next is Dawn Adams. She wants to speak to council in regard to road construction and business.
First, I'm just thankful that the roads are finally getting repaired, especially East Main is beautiful. So unfortunately, the construction crews that have been hired to do the work give no notice to the businesses, and we have the Jumpstart Java drive-through there. And the baristas, we get them all scheduled to come to work, and then they shut the road down right in the middle of it all without any notice. And we're trying to pay a barista, they're trying to earn their tips, and they've blocked the road and not letting any traffic through. So what I would like to see is notice, even 24-hour, so that we can schedule and not lose money as well as business. That's really
Okay.
our concern.
Yeah, we're done on East Main though, aren't we? We are done on East Main.
Theoretically.
Well, they came back for 4 months, and then they had said, well, they didn't do they had to come back and repair, I don't know, something that didn't hold up properly, and they didn't say anything, they just actually roped off the drive right in the middle of the peak hours in the morning
Okay.
and shut us down.
All right.
Is it okay if I say something?
Yeah, we're getting a little long in this. We need to,
Well, my biggest concern was, okay, if they're gonna be doing, Kiewit, I understand, is the construction company that did the work. I did have an issue with them 1 week ago today, and, because they showed up out of the blue and, with their barrels, and they blocked off our entrance, okay? And this happened continuously, during the whole process, it was horrible. And they don't have any investment in our community, they don't have employees
Okay.
from local community. These businesses, we've been there a long time, we work hard, and we deserve, I asked them, I said, can't I have at least a 24-hour notice? I scheduled 3 employees, now you shut down my driveway. It's not just an inconvenience to me as the business owner, but my employees, they deserve better.
Okay.
And they live here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone, any others?
That's all I have.
So, okay. Then I'm going to go on to point 3, which is approval of the minutes for the January 2nd regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? None? I'd ask for a motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the January 2nd, 2018 regular city council meeting.
Second.
Made and second. Would you call a roll, please?
Councilmember Schumacher,
Aye.
Councilmember Huckes.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner,
Aye.
Councilmember Gill,
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Any council member announcements? Well, go ahead, someone.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to announce that we have a vision committee tomorrow at 4 p.m. here at City Council, and it's open to the public.
Okay, I have another item I'm going to add on that, so we'll be well taken care of. Okay?
We'll get that agenda amended.
Okay, we're going to amend the agenda. Anything else? Mr. Meisner? I was
This is
wondering why
really,
you hadn't talked up.
somewhat non-business, and it is. Unfortunately, over the holiday weekend, I had the opportunity to interact with our local police department. There was an accident on Main Street, but the point is, two things happened. Officer Sabatino responded. There was a couple of young ladies, real young ladies, that were involved in this accident, and it was an apparent that that was their first encounter with an accident and a police officer, and those guys did an extremely good job of just handling the situation and making those two young ladies, even though they were potentially at fault, as comfortable as they could with the situation. Then I also got to witness, I'm going to say Officer Sabatino, utilize the new MTD system that we're utilizing, which just watching him utilize that and process the whole scene, I was very impressed, and I think that's going to be a very, very valuable asset.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, number 5 is adoption of the agenda and consent agenda. Could we have the administrator do the consent agenda? Tony?
Yes, Mayor and Council. Item 5A is to ratify purchase of a 22-foot LED Christmas tree with a 48-inch star from the Temple Display from Oswego, Illinois, at a cost of $13,802.20. 5B would extend bid 23-16 to B&G Construction for stormwater facility maintenance. This would be maintenance not only in the city's facilities, but also the agreement we have with the hydraulic ditch. That amount, though, has been lowered to $147,500. C would be extending bid 5117 to Avalanche Excavating, who did the downtown alley work last year. This year's work is scheduled for the 500 block, the north portion, and the 300 block, the southern portion, and the library parking lot. Avalanche did an outstanding job and had a considerable cost advantage over their competitors, so we're recommending we extend that bid as we can for that work. 5D would be extending bid 1817 to Lyle Signs for traffic control signs in an amount not to exceed $32,000. They would maintain their prices from 2017. 5E would authorize a contract services Pueblo County Health Department, who we've contracted for since 1988 for bacteriological testing of water samples. We do about 41 samples per month, so we're asking for that. 5F would authorize the mayor's signature of a memo of understanding with the city of Pueblo. This would be for the driver training of our police department, and it relates to just traffic cones that we would bring to the site and leave there. 5G would authorize the mayor's signature for an agreement for participation in the Upper Arkansas Recycling Program. That's a program we do in conjunction with the COG, and that'd be for an amount not to exceed $13,067. Most of the money is for containers related to the recycling program, and it's been quite popular. 5H would be approval of the Regional Communications Authority annual budget and our proportional share for this quarter, which is $140,962.24. We're a little less than 50% of the total contribution to that regional authority. And it will be interesting over the next couple of years to see whether the MTDs actually lower our call volume amount so we can actually save money. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. 5I would authorize addition of a scope of work to an existing contract with Atkins, who does our stormwater analysis. This would be for an amount of $180,000, of which $90,000 is coming from the state, $42,500 from the county, $5,000 from the hydraulic ditch, and the balance of $42,500 would be from the city, to examine and try to determine how we could mitigate flooding into the hydraulic ditch between the waters that transect both the city and the county. 5G is our budgeted for police interceptors. We had 2 bidders, and we're happy to report that Pharisee Ford locally has won that bid. Bid 6-18 is for our annual janitorial services for an amount not to exceed $70,000, and the Clean Company, which currently has a contract, is awarded that. They were substantially lower than all the competitors. And then finally, 20-18 is for thermoplastic paving markers for the street department from Flint Trading for an amount not to exceed $10,000. And that's sole source because it's a specialty item we've been using for years. Any questions?
Mr. Meisner?
Tony, I don't know that you can answer this, but on the recycling program
Yes.
on page, I don't even know that it is a page, but section 8, it mentions that the local authority will be responsible for purchasing and leasing the containers.
Yes.
Where are those at?
Those containers are those yellow containers. Judy's here. Judy, you want to address that? Come on up to that.
That's
I mean, are they the
actual
yellow ones like out on
They're-
Oak Creek Grade?
Yeah, we have.
The ones by Big R.
And Big
there's
R?
some-
Okay.
Mhm.
Those are our containers?
Those are yours.
That we purchased, yeah, for this program. And those are centralized sites throughout the city that allow people just to swing by and drop
Okay.
stuff off.
So
And-
when we initially started the program, we had grant funds, and so those containers were purchased initially with grant funds. Any that have been damaged over time are just replaced by you all. But there isn't, like, you aren't replacing those annually or anything like that. But you do own them, and you also determine where you want them to be, what the best locations are, and all of that.
What are the cost of those containers?
It's been a really long time.
What's that?
Said it's been a really long
Okay.
time. I don't remember
Yeah.
what they originally cost.
More than $1.
Yeah, much more than $1. They're, they are fairly expensive, but we have not replaced them often.
Okay.
It's very seldom. The majority of the cost of the program and your membership in it actually is for the hauling. It's the, our driver and truck to pick them up and, deliver the recyclables to their destination. So that's really the big cost of the program is transportation.
Mr. Meisner?
Let's start the new year right, okay?
Absolutely.
I'm done for you.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, and maybe for our chief, but in regards to the Regional Communication Authority agreement, last year there was the question that I asked about compensation for those operators.
Yes.
And as I understood the philosophy of whatever that organization is that their solution was to hire more people versus giving those current operators a compensation increase. Has that problem been addressed, or are we still
I
at
know
the
they
same
have
level of
increased
compensation?
the pay scale. They still suffer from what I would call excessive turnover. Not unusual for the nature of that particular type of authority, communication authority, but I'm hoping that the rate of turnover slows down. But the chief can provide you more information if you desire.
Did they talk about increasing the compensation for those operators?
We did, and one of the things we've talked about in that board as well, Councilman Meisner, is whether some of the vacancies that we currently have, whether they need that many dispatchers or whether those positions could be absorbed to do exactly what you're talking about, which is enhance the existing operators who are staying there. So in order for us to do that, we need to do a staffing analysis to see calls for service and do some restructuring. So it's a little bit down the road, quite honestly, and there's some things, both training and staff development, that need to take place ahead of time. So yes is the answer to your question, but it's not so simple.
But there's no specific adjustment in the current proposed budget?
There is a 3% cost of living adjustment, which they are going to fund with existing revenues from last year. But as far
They
as
did-
actual
Did the
salary.
same thing last year. I mean, it probably has to come up considerably more than that, but we suffer with the same problems in these, particularly these entry-level positions. We're non-competitive against places like Pueblo and Colorado Springs, but they're incrementally trying to improve that situation. And I think, as the chief said, there are other factors that maybe help retain those employees as far as the overall organizational culture and training, but it is getting old as far as us being a training ground for other communications authorities.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question. Why the significant reduction in the B&G thing?
Because monies were taken from that account and put into the study regarding the oil ditch. If we find out that's not adequate during the course of the year, we can always come back and adjust that, but we think, talking to Adam, that should be an adequate amount based upon their historical expenditures.
which specifically includes the clean out for storm, as I
Yeah.
understood.
50,000 is earmarked for that within that budget.
Tony, was that amount 147,000?
500.
500.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to change that figure, so the motion then would include that amended
To
figure.
amend it, 'cause
Is that
it's on
okay?
the
Everybody
agenda.
understand that? Okay. I'm going to call for a motion in a second. Mr. Meisner.
Mayor and council, I move that we approve the agenda and the consent agenda as read and modified.
Second.
Second. Any discussions on the motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you. Could we have the administrator's report, Tony? Do you have one?
The only thing we want to highlight right now is on, since you paid praise to the police department, which we appreciate, so we don't want to take their service for granted. On March the 7th, and we'll provide the specific time, there'll be a police leadership award conducted in this room, so we'll get that hour out to the public, but well-deserved from our men and women in blue.
And I'd have to back that up. I was involved in an accident. And our new car was totaled, and it was done very well. I did not know that the back seat of a police car didn't have soft cushions.
Mayor.
Publicly announced.
And my
It's a
wife
good
has a
fight.
picture of me sitting there, which Chief Harvey has a picture of, and I hope it goes no farther than that. But, yeah, I went to sit in there, and it was like dropping to the chasm, like, oh, boom. They're fiberglass.
Yeah.
I never knew that. But anyway, so very well done, well handled. I was just very impressed with the officers, and so thank you. Okay, let's move on. Number 7, ordinance number 1, series of 2018. This is a second reading. Would you read by title, please?
This is a bill for ordinance number 1, series of 2018, an ordinance rezoning certain real property within the city of Canyon City, Colorado, city-owned drainage facilities vicinity of 9th Street and Washington.
Could I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 1, series of 2018 upon second reading.
Second, Mr. Gill, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, could you call roll, please?
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Let's move on to number 8. It's a water rate adjustment for 4 Mile PDD with Planned District Development, Sun Canyon Development. Could I have a report from the city administrator?
Just getting Kevin Quinn queued up.
Okay.
We also have Dennis Minchow here to elaborate, but just to give you a brief overview, on December the 12th, the council met and discussed the proposed $280,000 economic development assistance for the golf course. In 2016, the golf course lost, according to Kevin Quinn, who's the sole owner of the golf course and 4 Mile Ranch, approximately $200,000, expects losses in the future too. Compounding that, the city has historically provided subsidized water rates to the golf course. In fact, in the past 10 years, when you compare the rates they paid to what a commercial entity would have paid, we saved the golf course approximately $666,000, or roughly $66,000 a year. The council has acknowledged that that's unfair to other commercial ratepayers, so given that, they've restructured the rates and you adopted those rates. So the golf course rates will rise by 32% this next year, from roughly $130 per thousand gallons to $172, and then we're projecting increases of 27% and 23% the next 2 years. So almost, we're approaching almost 100% increase in the next 3 years. Given that, Kevin wanted some immediate relief, he met with the mayor, Councilmember Meisner, members of the school district, the county, fire district, to see what kind of tax relief he could try to acquire. There's some long-term possibilities, but they're long-term. He needed something more immediate. The most immediate relief that could be provided really is in the water rates. To that end, we had proposed a 3-year tiered reduction of his water cost, $140,000 in 2018, $100,000 in 2019, and then $40,000. In consideration of that, the council wanted to see from Mr. Quinn the establishment of some model homes so we could start creating some traction and interest in the 4 Mile Ranch. We think ultimately that's a development that could potentially generate almost 2,500 home starts. It would equal in excess of 25% of the current population of the city. So clearly it has a huge financial impact on the community in a very positive way. Also, the council had requested either a lien or a deed of trust equal to the amount of money that was part of the assistance, which would be $280,000. And then marginal increases to the golf course rates so that they could better absorb these costs in the future. And we also were cognizant of that. Golf course rates in this region, from Colorado Springs to Pueblo to Canyon City, are very competitive. There's very little difference in pricing at all these golf courses. We've checked them all, so we wanted to be sensitive to that so he doesn't take himself out of the marketplace. Because right now it's a popular course, but predominantly for Denver and Colorado Springs golfers. It's a very popular venue for them. It's good value and close distance. And then finally, you sought the construction of a golf clubhouse. Currently, there's a temporary clubhouse. So that, to that end, the city's obligation would be to make these 3 scheduled payments of $140,000 if his border bills met or exceeded that amount. If they didn't, it'd be less, $100,000 in 2019 and $40,000. Kevin has agreed to, operate the golf course over the next 3 years, as he currently is operating it 12 months a year, and that he would also build at the minimum 2 model homes and have the building permits pulled by August of this year. He would also dedicate 5 acres of land. Now, I need to clarify, that dedication and the value of that dedication, whether it be residential, commercial, would be a credit towards this $280,000 obligation should he default. So we want to make that clear. And that's really the most significant thing, is that he would provide us a deed of trust, an encumbered property of which the value would be at least $280,000, coupled with this other dedication. So if for some reason after year 1, Kevin walks away and the course shuts down, we basically get reimbursed by the encumbrance on this property. We could either use it ourselves or sell it. So we have some assurance there. And then the city would have the right to inspect any of their financial records. To that end, I don't know if Kevin's on the line. He hasn't called in yet. I don't know if Dennis wants to say a few words before.
There he is.
Oh,
There he is.
Kevin,
Hi.
Hi, Kevin.
perfect timing. Just kind of provided the council an overview of the agreement, and I think they would probably be interested in asking you questions at this time.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm not physically there, but you can only miss your daughter's birthday so many times.
Yes. Got it. Any questions on council? Mr. Meisner? Good.
I have a question. Kevin, this is Jim Meisner. How are you?
Hi, Jim. How are you?
My question is an item B, and I don't know whether I direct it to you or to Tony or to the attorney, but the way it reads, it says the owner shall have completed and received building permits for at least 2 model homes on the property. Does that mean that the homes are going to be constructed, or that you're completing the building permit?
That means that
Pulling and
right now
executing the building permit.
right now in the context we're completing the building permit, but I've expressed to Tony, and I think I've expressed to a few of you guys that ideally it would be wonderful if we had 5 homes going vertical at that time. I don't want to make any false promises right now that you guys will look at and say, well, he didn't follow through on that. The way that this project will be successful is building homes and selling homes.
So is that clear to you, Councilmember Meisner, that this would mean receiving a building permit so he could begin construction by August on 2 model homes? That's the intent. And if he were to default on that obligation, you have remedies provided in the agreement. that he has to,
And I think the intent on Kevin's part is to under-promise and over-deliver, is what I read into this, because he said he'd like to have 5 houses going vertical.
That is spot on. right
But
there.
he's making the
Because you guys have
commitment
heard enough
that he can
of people
promise to honor.
over-promising and under-delivering.
true.
Right.
But
Is he actually going to build the homes this coming year after he gets the permits, or is he going to, wait another year before he starts building these homes?
Well, the building permits expire after 6 months, so once he gets and receives the building permit, he has to begin construction, or he's effectively in default of this agreement. So I don't think he intends to do that.
I don't think that's the case if you read the agreement. I mean, it just says that he has to have a building permit. Doesn't say he has to fulfill the building permit. And I'm just trying to read the agreement
But
as it
there-
is.
True, but there's a time exposure on the building permit.
Right.
And it expires after 6 months, so if he doesn't do something, then he technically doesn't have a building permit anymore, and he's in default.
It doesn't say that. It just says that he has to have completed and received a building permit. And if he does that, I think from that context, he's in compliance with the agreement.
True.
Whether he builds it or not, I think that's secondary. And it's probably a trust issue.
Well, it really comes down to, Tony, you mind if I chime in here? And Dennis, is Dennis Minchother?
Yeah, Dennis is here.
He's here.
Dennis wouldn't tell you if his suit's on fire, but Dennis, you can feel free to speak up at some point too. But the intent is to go vertical. The problem that I have, that I've been completely frank with everyone, is that we only have so many bullets left, and you all know how much we've spent in the last 11 years at 4 Mile Ranch. It's egregious. I mean, if you don't know the asset like I do and what I believe in, so for me to we have to go vertical, but I can't be tied into myself getting and funding that personally. I have to attract some developers, which I don't think I'll have a problem doing if I subordinate the land. I subordinate the dirt. They come in, they build a spec house, and then we get a piece of those profits. Albeit they'll be small, but they will be spec houses that reflect the ultimate vision of what we're talking about at Sun Canyon 4 Mile Ranch. So, I'm using this as a, and I think I've been pretty clear about it, as a tool to get some guys in there for really low risk to go vertical, and I don't think I'll have a problem with that, but we all have bosses, and I have bosses, albeit I own personally the majority stake in this, and I want to get some people in there that also buy into what I'm projecting will happen there. I hope that makes sense. I think I've been pretty clear about that throughout.
And let me, this, Mayor Troutman, City Council, we are currently developing house plans for filling in the existing lots that are on Cowboy Way, and they're in progress. The plans are currently out to bid. They're preliminary sets of plans. We've got them out to bid to price them. We'll know here by, middle of February whether or not, we're going to submit plans for bid on those lots. One of the issues we ran into with the existing lots that Kevin still has is they're smaller lots. They're only 45 feet wide. We may need to work with planning and Adam to replat those to 50 feet wide, but we're trying to develop a house that'll fit on those to be able to fit the target market for the area currently. I see the lots going forward as being 50s and 60s rather than the smaller 45s that were left over out there. But there is progress being made on the building plans and working towards the permit and construction.
Mr. Mayor?
John?
Yes, I do have a question. This may be for Corey, but both in the description of the agreement and the agreement, it says the owner will, looking at item C, owner further agrees to dedicate. My question is, what does that mean? What's the legal definition of dedication?
The legal definition is a gift, but I want to make sure that you understand that what Tony said earlier in the discussions with Mr. Quinn, item C would eventually come out in the final version because Mr. Quinn is unwilling to dedicate 5 acres on top of the $280,000 deed of trust. So the final version of this agreement would not have C in it.
That would not have that in it?
Correct.
Thank you. That takes care of my question.
Is that final agreement also excluding that they, like on the second page, it's not numbered, it says that they would complete the golf house or the clubhouse?
My understanding is in the discussions between Mr. Quinn and Tony that he has said he cannot build a clubhouse, and so, yeah, that section would be deleted as well.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, if you all think about it, it's, we go out and we lead with our chin and get $4 million more pregnant with a clubhouse, not your typical clubhouse, but a rec center that it will fit into what we envision for Sun Cannon. And if we just go out and do a brick and stick type of typical, half-ass clubhouse, that's not what, that's just a waste of money. What we want to do is to get some, get some momentum and then go forward and not build a clubhouse, but build a recreation center that also consists of a clubhouse that will service the golf course. But for me to, go out and spend that amount of money, on a clubhouse that for all intents and purposes is not worth anything. We have to get some momentum here. We have to go vertical on some model homes, see what the appetite is, show them the plans for various plans, and God, Dennis and I have 10 versions of it, of a form of a rec center clubhouse that once we get, some forward progress, we can go ahead and do that. But for me to tell you right now that we're going to do a clubhouse unequivocally is that would be just that'd be crap.
I want to add also to the construction of a clubhouse. Where the existing clubhouse facility is now sits on 5 residential lots that's zoned for residential. There was a variance granted back in the beginning when the golf course was built to allow the golf course operations to be there. The ultimate location of the clubhouse requires a mile of roadway and utilities and infrastructure to get to the ultimate location where the current zoning allows the clubhouse to go. And so in addition to the $4 million cost of a clubhouse and rec center, there's another additional $2 million worth of just roadways and infrastructure to get to it, and it's not affordable at this time. We need to get to some volume of 40 or 50 homes a year to be able to afford to put up a facility that large.
I still have some questions. Kevin, this is Ashley Smith. And
Hi.
In conversations, it has been mentioned that you're trying to set up this investment so that you can maybe sell this to future developers or sell to other investors to take over the project. Would a 3-year agreement be palatable enough to lure future investors into the Sun Canyon development? Or do you need something more long-term?
No, it's a fair question. I think that that through the conversations I've had with Tony and Dennis and a gazillion other people, but I think that for right now, this gives breathing room to the development, and so then we can say, all right, we're not just losing X amount of dollars every year on the golf course. We can pivot here and now exhale and say, okay, we're going to go forward with this, this, and this. And I look at this and say, Dennis is more cautious than I, but I look at this and say, if we get to that point of 40 to 60 homes sold, that gives me the confidence to know that then we can go forward and work with the city and all other entities as far as moving forward with the clubhouse, because that's going to be a very important piece to the puzzle, making this successful. As far as me looking at this and saying, well, we're going to sell some here, sell some there, that happens all the time. There's 1,600 acres. But conceptually, would if this thing all works out perfectly, it works out, that will be great for Canyon City. For me, I would not be there for the last nail being banged, but I would be there, and I have been there for the long term, and I would make sure that we have good citizens coming in and good developers coming in that aren't just gonna that have the wherewithal to go vertical and fulfill their obligations, where we don't have what you've seen in the past in some other developments where you have half-built homes and they walk away from. So we need to get that inertia. We need to get some momentum here, and that even the 3 years right now is, words can't express how much I appreciate that. It gives me some breathing room to actually work, and move forward here. I don't know after 36 months what the future holds, but I do know that we have an opportunity now, and we're going to seize that, if this were to be approved.
Okay, I have another question. Your closest competition as far as golf courses go is the Sumo Golf Course in Florence. And they currently have an agreement with the city of Florence where they have water rights.
I really want to take you out to dinner. I really appreciate this question, but go ahead.
Well, I'd love to have dinner in Boston. That sounds great.
It's pretty cold.
Yeah, as long as my husband can come along, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
But as far as the Sumo Golf Course, the city of Florence is currently providing them raw water rights at the rate of 10 cents per 1,000 gallons. However, that's raw water. But Canyon City also is rich in raw water rights. And you've talked about long-term development and long-term plans. Is there any consideration for a long-term plan in converting the golf course to raw water? It might be more reasonable cost, and for the city to provide raw water rights to you instead of treated water.
Yes, and Tony and I have spoken about that. It's a insanely easy transition to go to raw water for a golf course. It's something that would be a complete game changer, and would also, no matter what happens to the development, it would be something that would make the golf course profitable for the city for as long as people play golf. That would be that would be just an amazing thing. And any study will show that golf courses don't need the water level that we're getting today. raw water is fine.
Actually, maybe we could provide you some additional information. As Kevin indicated, we've talked about that. Both Adam and Bob are looking at the feasibility and the cost of doing that. There are a couple of immediate issues. One, the distance to the closest. The hydraulic ditch is the most logical location to receive the raw water. One of the downsides is that ditch doesn't always have water in it year-round, so that would have to be addressed. And then there's the distance between where that ditch terminates near the Hampton Inn and the golf course, which is a considerable distance. So looking at piping and pumping costs, we should have an estimate in the next couple of weeks, but long-term, it probably would be a very viable and feasible solution. But immediately,
Yeah,
it's
and
not.
Tony, I may have not a study that should be produced to the public or anything else, but I do have some numbers on that, and that would, it's like putting a well in your yard. You know, the upfront costs are a lot, but you make it up in 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. But it's, I mean, the delta between what we're paying today and 10 cents is, you know, it changes everything.
It's only 1,700% more.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to I can do math pretty well, and it's even hard for me to calculate that.
Mr. Meisner?
At our previous meeting, I think Bob had mentioned that he understood that 4 Mile owned shares in some weird ditch company. Adam, does that ring a bell?
There's two ditches that come off of 4 Mile Creek, and I think they have some shares there.
Adam, is that through just various water rights and things of that nature, or?
Yeah, yep. But I think development-wise, it's pretty much the same as what we're talking about with the hydraulic ditch.
Yeah.
They're much smaller ditches.
Yeah, they are
But
smaller,
But those
they're-
possibly.
they're
could-
there.
They could play into the equation for the wintertime stuff, though, possibly.
Yep.
Mr. Meisner?
I have another question if nobody else does. On page of the actual proposed agreement, item 1A, but then actually go to page 2, it makes reference to the fact that so long as the actual cost of the water provided to the Gorse exceeds 140,
Yeah.
but if they only have 135 in water cost for that first year, which potentially would never happen, should we not then only be paying 140 to these perceived funds?
No, we'd only pay 135.
No, you pay 135. I mean, and then I would cry poor mouth and see if I could grab that 5 if we went over budget the next year, and
Take
you guys
Ashley.
would yell at me, and then we'd have a conversation about it. But the way it was presented and the way that I think Tony understands it, I understand it, is that that's the ceiling. It's not that we can not water the course in August and keep the and get that margin, you know.
Does that answer your question?
I go back to, you know, we want to keep the course in great shape. We want to. This is one of the tools that we're going to have to move this project forward, and to move the project forward, to have a brown golf course or a dead golf course doesn't do anyone any good.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else?
I just was curious if Kevin and or Dennis have any additional comments that you'd like to make.
No, I just, back on the raw water, we've got some experience in raw water systems for golf courses. I'd be more than happy to help Adam and them just take a look at it and help vet some different alternatives.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
And I want to say thank you again for even considering it. It's a big deal for me personally because you know, I read the comment. I don't read papers. God knows I shouldn't. But I read the paper and I read the comment section, and you know, it stinks to hear like you're some carpetbagger just coming in to flip it for a profit when you've invested over $20 million in an asset. for 11 years. So it's nice to know that you guys appreciate that and you're considering this. It's important for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions of council? Discussions? Mr. Meisner?
Just a public comment that Dennis Weed is here, but he could maybe verify this, but I just want public people to understand that I at least fundamentally believe that this particular proposition and problem is vastly different than the problem that we dealt with, that the previous council dealt with in terms of the other golf course issue. But for those that are not aware of that situation, fundamentally those individuals were wanting to essentially give that golf course to the city and have the city run and manage that particular golf course, which the council at that particular time didn't think that that was feasible. So we just need to keep in mind that these situations are drastically different in terms of what we dealt with.
And 4 miles is a much better golf course, that's my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else of council have got any questions?
Mr. Mayor, in consideration that our residents have spoken that economic development is #1 in their priority for our city, and that having a golf course is not only essential for development in 4 Mile and Sun Canyon, as well as it's a huge marking of the vitality of our community itself, in saying that we are a community that is development minded and active, and in recruiting for the retirement community and the active community, I would like to say, and in respect to the fact that over the past 10 years, we have had an agreement with the golf course currently with water rates, that we move ahead and accept the water rate agreement for 4 Mile PDD and Sun Canyon development as it is written. And I guess that's my motion.
That's your motion, to make a
Yes.
motion then? Okay.
As written.
As written?
Well, with the modifications.
Yeah, well, that's true with the modifications that we made.
Yes.
I think the
Corey.
request from staff this evening is for general direction, because we do not have the exhibits yet created that will be attached to the final agreement that identify the land that is subject to the $280,000 deed of trust. So I think what we're hearing tonight is a consensus to complete the exhibits that are needed for the final version of the agreement and bring it back to your next meeting.
Okay, so,
And
Do
so
we
don't
need to
any-
vote on that agreement?
No.
We do not. We do not need any action other than essentially a nod of the heads to bring back a final version consistent with the discussion tonight.
Well,
Okay.
I'm not sure if every single council member would have a nod of the head. Do we need to decide?
If we're just asking for consensus, I certainly think that if you can see my head nod, yes.
okay, well, was it fair to just start out and see who's going to nod their head and who isn't?
For
I
the
mean,
benefit of Kevin, who.
Let's
And-
start.
and- and
Let's-
Mr. Mayor, we don't need any sort of unanimity. What we
I know.
need is a general consensus to bring it back.
And I'm trying to inject some humor here. So, would you start, Mr.
I think
Gill?
it's a good idea. I mean, it's going to be good for the citizens of Canyon City. It's going to be long-term growth for the city. I think that this opportunity is very important, and the fact that we have the stopgap, should he fail, to recoup that money and put it back into our economic development, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I don't think there's probably a whole lot of danger for the citizens of Canyon City personally.
Thank you, Mr. Meisner.
I concur with what he said.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Yes, I agree, and I'm look forward to seeing the final agreement.
Okay, Ms. Smith?
And I do want to clarify that we are not actually technically reducing water rates. We're using money that was earmarked for economic development to help further encourage economic
Correct.
development
That's
in the
correct.
4 Mile Golf Course.
Ms. Schumacher?
I'll wait and see the final agreement.
So that's a semi-nod or what?
That's a semi-nod.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
You have a full nod from me. I was out there this weekend, and I was looking at all the lots that have previously sold or just recently sold.
Right.
And I think we owe it to the people who live there currently and are planning to move there in the future. I think we owe it to our citizens
Correct.
to take a look at it.
Thank you. Mr. Katz?
It's a wonderful golf course. We've been dealing with this property for over 10 years with various developers. I hope it works out, but This is not the first time this has come up. Like I say, it's a beautiful golf course, so we'll look at the final agreement.
So let's go forward then, and we'll have that agreement back, and thank you, thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Can we qualify that as a semi-nod too, or is that a?
So, no, you have my
Well-
full nod, even though I'm not a golfer, but I see that as a huge economic benefit for our town, and I certainly wish you well and would help you in that.
Well, and I'm happy to report that lots are selling very well.
They are.
The growth of the
Right.
economy.
There are no homes that I know of left to sell out there in the True Grid area, which is astonishing.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Kevin.
thank
Kevin,
you all
and
so
thank you,
much,
Dennis.
and I think it's, Dennis, Dennis and I will get back to you, but I don't foresee really a big issue in getting everyone comfortable with it from the collateral perspective. You know, I would hope that, I foresee that being something that we can resolve quickly. Dennis,
Okay.
do you agree with that?
All right, thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Okay, let's
All
move
right,
on.
thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's move on to number 9. It's a public hearing, the transfer of ownership of a 3.2% beer retail license at 1501 Central. Before I go any further, do we have to do all these, or can we do these in some?
We have to do separate public hearings because of the separate locations. We're going to try streamlining it, though, with some of these staff reports. So if you go ahead and open the
Okay.
public hearing, we'll move right through these.
All right, then I'm going to open up the public hearing for 1501 Central Avenue. Could I have a report from City Clerk, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is Gabriel. He's representing Pastoral Marketing, doing business as Alta Convenience Store, 6322 at 1501 Central Avenue. As with this application and the following 2 applications, this report will stand for each individual. What we do is we'll have a public hearing just to hear if there's any public comment on each individual location. So I'll begin with this report and then you'll ask the questions of Gabriel, and we'll move forward pretty quickly with this.
Okay, thank you.
This is for a transfer of a 3-2 beer off-premises license held by Allen D's LLC Country Corner. The notice was posted at the location. They plan to operate the establishment as been done in the past with no significant changes. This one, it needs to be noted, there's a laundromat operation attached to the same building. However, it is not part of the licensed premises and has no interior access. The local manager and employees will be required, as with the next upcoming establishments, to attend training offered by the city. A temporary license has been issued, and they have been operating under that license pending this hearing and final approval, during which time there have been no areas of concern with their operation. Upon review of this application, the appropriate state and city forms have been filed and submitted. The diagram of the premises meets the filing requirements, and the applicant has possessions through ownership, which recently came through, and also holds a valid state's sales tax license. So enclosed in your packet, you were included the applications and the diagram. So with that, you want to go ahead and ask Gabriel of the questions and let them stand for the next 2 applications as well.
Okay. Ms. Schumacher, would you like to do that for us?
I would love to.
Thank you.
Let me flip to my proper thing here. Is this considered a new or renewal?
It's a transfer. That
Transfer.
could be a new on your sheet.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
We're both lucky tonight.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with the Colorado Liquor Code?
I am.
Will there be a copy of the liquor code on file with your establishment?
Yes, ma'am.
How many employees do you expect to have, and how will they be trained on the liquor code and liquor laws?
So at this particular location, there's 3 separate locations, but at this particular location, we have a total of 5 employees. 2 will be on at any present time that will be IDing and selling beer on hand. As far as the training program goes, each employee and manager are required to do computer-based training that's sponsored through NACS, which is the National Association of Convenience Stores. We use the TAMS program, which is Techniques of Alcohol Management. It's about a 4 to 6 hour course, depending on how long it takes them to go through and answer all the questions and take the small quizzes. We also, to stay compliant and test our compliance, we are signed up with the BARS program, which is also sponsored through NACS. which monthly goes out and does almost a mystery shop with younger adults aged 21 to 26. And depending on how they do with their IDing, they're either rewarded with an in-program reward that we do. Some of the managers do different things and extra things because it reflects on their scorecard. But if for some reason we do have an instance where we fail that particular mystery shop, then we follow through with mandatory, more extensive training and follow-up that's required.
Great. I'm impressed. How did you acquire signatures on the petition? Is this the right one?
Yeah, that's correct. That's a transfer. There was no, since this is a transfer, the
Okay.
petition wasn't.
Okay. Okay, are you fully aware that you're responsible for compliance with the Colorado Liquor Code and that any violations of this code may be held against you and/or your business and result in suspension and/or revocation of your liquor license?
Yes, ma'am, we certainly are.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Any other questions of council? At this time, are there any comments from the audience? I would like to go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and I would entertain a motion in a second.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we've closed the public hearing, haven't we?
We have.
Make a motion that we approve the application for transfer of ownership on a 3.2% beer retail license at 1501 Central Avenue to Pester Marketing Company.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hamrick, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you. Let's go on to number 10, the public hearing. The transfer of ownership of a 3.2% beer retail license for 2075 Fremont Drive. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Could I report from City Clerk, please?
I'll just go ahead and briefly let you know that this, my previous staff report stands for this item as well, other than this is a transfer of a 3.2 beer off-premise license previously held by Beaver Park Investments, doing business as Quick Stop. This one as well was issued a temporary license to get them through this temporary period. So with that, if you have any other further questions of Mr. F. Gabriel, go ahead and ask him. Probably the only difference would be the number of employees.
Okay. Ms. Schumacher, you might as well keep going.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
Do you have to read all that?
Let's just ask him
Just
about the
ask
number of
the number of
employees
employees.
Okay.
and let those questions stand as
Okay.
well.
How many employees do you have? And you can just yes or no. Are your employees trained on the liquor code and liquor laws?
Yes, they are, and we have a total at this location currently of 6 employees, with 2 employees working at any time to ID.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Any comments from council? Questions? Any comments from the audience?
I have a quick question.
Too late. No, go ahead, Mr. Meisner.
You mentioned you have 2 employees.
Two, at that time, we have 2 that would be currently running the point of sale and IDing and selling beer at any particular time. A total of 6, though.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments from the audience? Questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public meeting and ask for a motion in a second.
Mr. Mayor,
Smith?
I move that we approve the public hearing for application for transfer of ownership of a 3.2% beer retail license at 2075 Fremont Drive from Beaver Park Investments Incorporated to Pester Marketing Company.
Second.
Second, Schumacher, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? None? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, we're going to do another public hearing, a transfer of ownership of a 3.2% beer retail license for 420 Royal Gorge Boulevard. I'm going to open up the public hearing at this time. Could I have a report from City Clerk?
Again, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is the same last one that we have to report on, still held by and being transferred from Beaver Park Investments. This is for the Hanks Travel Plaza at 420 Royal Gorge Boulevard. Temporary license was issued as well as at this location too. And then I would just ask Gabriel, how many employees do you plan on having here at Hanks?
At this particular time, we have 9 current employees. And again, with the other 2, there will only be 2 at any given time that would be selling beer at the point of sale.
Gabriel, I just have one question.
Sure, ma'am.
I see Pester's purchasing quite a few locations. Here in Fremont County, I have another one that they will be hearing as well next month. How many do you have in the state of Colorado?
Let's see, I can tell you now as a whole, as of today, actually, I believe we closed today with the other one. We just picked up 43 more. In total, we have 110 locations now. But that also does include 5 in Washington, 3, I want to say, in New Mexico, 1 in Nebraska, and 4 in Kansas. Everything else is in the state of Colorado.
The reason I do that isn't bringing something into another public hearing. Is their training program. They're on it with her training of those individuals. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application of transfer of ownership on a 3.2% beer retail license at 420 Royal Gorge Boulevard from Beaver Park Investments to Pester Marketing Company.
Okay, well, I'll close the public hearing, then you can do that, okay?
Oh,
No,
I
that's
thought you
fine.
did it.
No. I'm going to go ahead and close the public
Streamlining
hearing,
it.
and we're streamlining this.
Okay. Do I have to say it all over again?
No, you're fine. We think we got the hint there. Yeah.
Okay.
Could we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Hamrick. Any discussion on the motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye, and welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Welcome to Canyon City.
Thank you. I was just relocated here, and I'm looking forward to being an active member of the community. So I appreciate
you.
your time and consideration.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. I don't understand this. For convenience, the public, 12 and 13 is zone change and special review use for 230 Yale Place. My read says for convenience, the public hearing portion for items 12 and 13 will be combined.
The public hearing will be combined.
Okay, got it. We're going to open the public hearing then. Going to have a report from the city planner. And welcome, I don't think we've met. So-
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Patrick Mulready. I am the city planner, the new city planner. Started and worked a little bit with Terry Bernath last month and became full-time at the start of this month. And I'm looking forward to getting to meet and know all of you individually. So hopefully, as the song goes, I will try not to sing out of key, so.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good luck, yeah. Okay, the public hearing is open. We're going to have your report this time.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of council, this evening we are here to consider the request for a zone change from R1 low-density residential to R2 medium-density residential and a special review use which would allow for an accessory dwelling unit at 230 Yale Avenue. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Yale Place and Allison Avenue. It is currently zoned R1 low-density residential, which allows for single-family residential uses. The property contains a single-family residence and a detached garage structure. Last year, the property became the subject of a zoning investigation when it appeared that a separate accessory dwelling unit had been created in the space over the garage at this location. In July 2017, council denied an application for an accessory dwelling unit by R1 zone district standards. This is a special review use and requires approval as part of a public hearing. This denial occurred because the residency requirement for an accessory dwelling unit in an R1 was not met. The property owner lives out of state, and the requirement is that the property owner either live in the accessory dwelling unit or in the principal structure for at least 6 months out of the year. That is specified in section 17.15.030, paragraph F of our Land Development Code. The applicant now seeks to rezone the property to an R2 zone district, which does not impose a residency requirement in order for approval of an accessory dwelling unit. This zone change requests are evaluated against four requirements established in paragraph 17.40.040, paragraph A. The first of these criteria is the subject property, or was it originally zoned in error, and that error inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The subject property is part of a vast area zoned R1 to the east of the high school, which you see depicted in this aerial photo. It shares the low-density characteristics with the district. While it is true that the high school itself is zoned R2, the high school, as a matter of de facto logic, is not itself a residential character use. One must go to the west side of the high school before you encounter medium-density residential uses in this district. Thus, there has not been an error in the original zoning. Characteristic number 2, the area of the requested rezoning is changing or has already changed to such an extent that facilitating redevelopment of the area is to be encouraged. What you see here is a depiction of the zoning as it overlays this entire area. The portion of Canyon City that you are looking at here has a pattern of land use that dates back at least 65 years. And the only other accessory dwelling unit in sight to the area is well west of the high school at the location, at the intersection of 8th and Fairview. That particular location, the dimensions of the lot do in fact warrant an R2 medium density designation. In short, there has been no pattern of redevelopment that has existed in this area to warrant, in fact, any kind of a zone change. There is no pattern of redevelopment to encourage. Criteria number 3 is the requested rezoning necessary to provide a site for community-related use which was not anticipated during the original zoning of the property or adoption of the comprehensive plan. There is no community-related use associated with this particular request. It is merely a request that would create functionally 2 dwelling units on one lot. Finally, criteria 4, which is specified in the next section of the code, that would be section 17.40.050, that has to do with the lot dimensions and are they inconsistent with the existing zoning, which would potentially create variance-worthy situations. The subject property meets and in fact is well within the minimum lot sizes for both the R1 and R2. It is well in excess of the minimum lot size, in fact. So with respect to the analysis of the accessory dwelling unit, approval of an accessory development unit on the property would effectively create 2 independent dwelling units. As was established by council in July 2017, the subject property does not meet the owner residency requirement to allow an accessory dwelling unit to be approved within the existing R1 zoning. An ADU can be approved if the subject property is rezoned to R2. In the event of a rezoning request to R2 is not approved for the subject property, the requested ADU itself becomes effectively academic because it can't happen at that point. Therefore, as part of a recommendation, following a public hearing on the rezoning request that was conducted November 22nd, 2017, Planning Commission cited findings of fact to support a recommendation for denial of the rezoning request. If council seeks to uphold this recommendation, Planning Commission's findings of fact, which are included in your agenda packet, should be incorporated into your motion. If council seeks to approve the zone change request, staff recommends council continue the hearing until February 5th, 2018. Zone changes require the adoption of an ordinance, and given that Planning Commission's recommendation was for denial, there was no ordinance included with this agenda item. The continuance would provide staff with sufficient time to prepare that ordinance and bring it to you. With respect to the accessory dwelling unit request, if council seeks to approve the zone change request and continue the public hearing until February 5th, in consideration of the ADU request should also be similarly continued. As a special review use, it will also require the adoption of an ordinance. If council does not approve the zone change request, a decision on the accessory dwelling unit becomes unnecessary, as the property would not qualify for an accessory dwelling unit within the existing R1 zone, and this relates back to the decision last summer. That would conclude staff's questions. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Any questions to the planner? Mr. Meisner?
Yeah, we went over this thing last year, and I'm confused as to, I guess I shouldn't say I'm confused, but apparently, things have not changed fundamentally from where they were at the first time we considered this. Is that the owner still lives out of town. He still apparently is using this garage as some sort of living unit. I say apparently, which is in defiance of city request. I think that we submitted some kind of a vacate for that garage. Is that not correct? Or to at least cease using it as a residence?
Abatement would be the next step. What the applicant chose to do was file for the rezoning request and at the same time contemporaneously file for a special review use approval, which would allow for the accessory dwelling unit that effectively forestalled enforcement of the abatement. So this matter is now before you as a land use application that needs a dispositive solution of some sort. And pending your decision on how to act on that, that will move us forward in one way or the other. Either there will be an accessory dwelling unit on a rezoned property, or abatement proceedings can begin.
Questions? Questions, Mr. Hamrick?
Yes, I have a question. If council does not approve this rezoning and then gets to the question of the ADU, is there some other path forward for the property owner to be able to use that structure as a dwelling?
As a dwelling, no. At that point, they would have exhausted the options under zoning that would be available to them, and that it would fall into a matter of abatement, so that the conditions that make it a separate dwelling unit would have to cease.
Thank you.
Any questions of council?
Are these representatives?
Yes, they'll be asked next. They'll be asked next.
I mean,
When
it's
council is
just- I
done.
wanna hear from
Planner.
that.
Okay. Mr. Gill?
In my recollection, this ADU was never building permitted, nor does it have a certificate of occupancy. Is that correct?
I do not know the standard or the status as to building permit or certificate of occupancy. I would have to find that out from Kathy Olsch.
It's my recollection, it was brought up at the planning commission, and those two steps were not achieved. And please correct me if somebody has some other information on this.
Well, I remembered it that way
I
too.
think I read that in the paperwork, but I don't think it would be possible to get a permit or certificate of occupancy if it's in, if it's not compliance with the zoning.
Correct, so that would still make it, I think, ineligible to be an ADU. Like I said, we've had this conversation before, without those two steps being there.
Any questions of the planner from council?
Yeah,
Okay.
use a different color ink, other than yellow for your text.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Would you, these I expect are the applicants or owners. Would you please give us your name and how you are standing there?
I'm Flo Arona, and I'm the property manager for Mr. Edmund Canny. When we left here the last time with the zoning people, I understood that there was a question of whether they were going to put this on the talk table or whatever they called it and discuss whether maybe they should change something about that residency requirement of the owner.
That may have been some discussion, but the point is that there hasn't been a change, to the best of my knowledge, and you can reaffirm that. There has not been a change in residency, the residency requirement for R1, so we're still
Did they
bound
talk
by
about
that.
it?
Pardon?
Did they even talk about it when they went back?
That would be an issue for
Are
the
you
planning commission.
Referring to about the planning commission discussion, because it wasn't discussed at council.
Right.
Okay, that I don't know, we'd have to find out. Nothing has come, the way it works is it would have to come to council for some type of change in ordinance. And it has not on any agenda.
Yeah, if they did discuss it, they didn't forward,
If they did, they didn't forward anything.
they didn't forward a request to council to make that change.
It may be in the works, I don't know.
When, I'd like to make one other statement. When this property, when that development was done, that was 2 parcels until Mr. Canny bought it. And that apartment was built back in 90-something,
The garage?
the garage and the apartment. And someone lived in it, but it was a separate parcel at that time. It had an address of 1336 Allison.
I understood that there was also the complication with an address, because didn't the fire department request that there be a specific address for that residence because of some response issues? So,
That's right. But at the time that it had that address to start with, it was a separate parcel from the front house.
that's new information to me, too.
So, my name is Chantal Severs, and I am the young lady that has been living in this place since it was rented out to me. There is an absolutely fabulous apartment that was actually built into this place. It has heated floors, ambient lighting. It is fabulous, okay? But,
Could you talk into the mic, please? I think we're missing some of it.
would you like me to repeat the information
Sure,
given?
go ahead.
My name is Chantal Severs, and I'm the young lady that has been renting this unit. It's an absolutely wonderful unit. It has heated floors, ambient lighting. It's something that most people my age would probably dream of, and it has been a dream living there. However, as I'm sure you could well imagine, the zoning issue has been quite heavy, because it's something that, of course, would weigh heavy on someone's mind. With that being said, I understand that you guys didn't necessarily know that there was an apartment that was fully furnished and built up there. Is that correct? You thought it was a garage? Is that right?
I'm going to say no, because if it were just a garage, we wouldn't have been having this discussion today, nor would have we had the discussion a year ago or whenever it was.
Just wanted to make sure
And
I was correct in my
The
understanding.
conversation that I recall with this over the year or so, was that this was built by the gentleman who owns the home to be quote-unquote a man cave, is what I recall in the conversations.
That is not true.
Well, I'm pretty sure what I heard. Thank you, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
I'm sorry.
He did not build it.
When it was designed to be a man cave. And whoever built it, maybe I've used the wrong word with the owner, but like I said, I've been involved with this all the way since Planning Commission and everything else, so that was the understanding that I had.
Okay.
I can assure you with 100% certainty, it does not look, smell, or function like a man cave, sir. Just
Well, that's
saying.
besides.
We're dealing with an ADU and
Put
a
it
zone
out.
change here.
Yeah, that's-
You know,
So if I'm
whatever it
correct
looks
in
like, smells like,
understanding-
and acts like is still city ordinance wise, sorry.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Hamrick?
Mr. Mayor, I sat on the Planning Commission when this came before the Planning Commission, and the question of the one lot versus 2 lots was something that was discussed in front of the Planning Commission. Ms. Bernath did step out of the meeting. We paused the meeting. She did check the current plat. It is currently 1 lot.
Right.
And that is something, if you had information about that change when it occurred or something, that might be a factor that could be considered, but we don't have that in front of us at this time.
Would that change anything if it used to be 2 lots and it was built accordingly?
It wouldn't change anything in the analysis as to the status of the ADU and the nature of the request to rezone the property to R2. If someone were to come and propose to replat the property into 2 lots, that may be a potential remedy. However, we're going to need to take a look at access and shared access and the necessary easements that would need to be reciprocally granted to both lots. So it's a bit of a complicated issue that we would have to take a look at, but that could potentially be a remedy. As a matter of the zoning itself, you've got essentially two options. You can find for upholding the Planning Commission's recommendation of denial, in which case the ADU at that point goes away as an issue, or if you choose to approve the zone change, we'd ask you to continue it so we can bring you back an ordinance, and then the night you consider the ordinance, you could follow along with a consideration of the ADU. But those are at this point the options that are in front of us.
Okay, so Patrick, in the writing, in the report, or the minutes from the Planning Commission, it says that the city allowed ADUs in 2011, and they're aware that this particular ADU was established after that time. However, there was a provision that they could still get a certificate of compliance, but there never was one that was received.
Not to my knowledge, no.
And also, on the next page, that Mrs. Bernath said they questioned if there was an existence of a building permit for this.
The certificates of compliance, as I understand them, came into existence when the ADU ordinance was effectively adopted in 2011. If there were accessory dwelling units that existed prior to the adoption of that ordinance, and those could be inspected and proven to have been properly constructed, at that point, they could be given a certificate of compliance, and they would effectively be an accessory dwelling unit. So that's not the case that we have here, because as we understand it, this dwelling unit was created well after the adoption of the 2011 ordinance.
Okay, and it did not get a certificate, nor that you're aware of was given a building permit to build in the first place.
I can't speak to the issuance of a building permit. I have not researched that. I would have to ask our building official about that. But I believe when this came before Planning Commission, there may have been some questions about that, and the folks who were present at that Planning Commission hearing may have more recent knowledge than I do.
Isn't that important to know if there was a building permit given or not given?
I would assume that it would be fairly important, but at this point, the question isn't whether there was a building permit properly issued and whether a certificate of occupancy was granted. My suspicion is, because building permits usually need to be signed off by both the city planner and the city engineer, if this is an accessory dwelling unit that hadn't been properly approved under zoning, the city planner probably could not have signed a building permit.
Yeah, I'm probably assuming that too. So regardless of how beautiful the apartment is or how fantastic it is, it was built without a permit.
That is
And without getting approval from the city or having a certificate of occupancy.
correct.
How did you establish it was done after 2011? I live about a block from there, and I think it was, well, there a long time before 2011.
As far as I'm aware, that was information my predecessor gleaned from conversations with the owner.
I think it's been there longer than that. I do. And I know he lives
But
across the
regardless, they
street.
don't have their certificate of compliance.
I know.
Question.
Mr. Meisner.
Mr. Attorney, do we in fact have the authority to approve the zoning, considering the fact that it doesn't meet any of the 4 conditions that are required for a zoning change?
The Planning Commission made those findings that are recommended by staff for you to follow. But you could certainly look at this and say, we think there was an error in zoning. Do I think, based on what you have been presented, that would be an appropriate finding? Absolutely not. But you have evidence tonight that you can consider whether you agree with the Planning Commission or not. But the Planning Commission's determination as to those 4 criteria were that they don't meet it. It's up to you to decide whether you've heard anything differently tonight.
But doesn't 1740-040 state that rezoning should only be considered if 1, 2, 3, 4?
And so Planning Commission has given you its opinion as to those 4 criteria.
Okay.
The question is whether you heard anything different tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
I think a recommendation to possibly do a lot split, there's no access problems there at all. You can come right off Dewey, you can come right off Yale. I don't think there's access problems. The lot is certainly big enough, and I think then it would fit in, and this would solve the problem.
I agree.
That's what I would say
That would be
too.
an awesome outcome if that could be done and solve the problem.
I mean, I just don't see you getting the Zone 1 approval done. I don't see you getting the Zone 2, but if the whatever it's called, rezoning, Adam, help me out here, what's that term?
Replatting?
Replatting. I mean, if you do that, that may solve your problem, and then you've got both.
Then you have two separate residences, one's not an ADU, da-da-da-da, two different addresses for the fire department and such. I think,
Would love that.
Yes, Dina?
Hi, just one comment. I don't know the exact setbacks, but I know those two structures they're detached, but they're very, very close together. So they may not meet setback requirements in terms of requesting to split the lots. So there could be still a request coming forward that then would include a variance from a setback standpoint.
And
I
that
don't
would
know
be
that
fine.
for sure. I'm just saying, based on my brief knowledge of the site and how
Yeah,
close these
okay.
two structures are, that may be an issue.
These are two very attractive structures. I live down the street, and I just think that this would be not the right thing to do to try to not, well, we don't have enough rentals anyway, to preclude someone from renting that. They're very nice structures, and they've been well kept. Mr. Weed, would you like to address us?
Are we done with the, are
Whoa.
we done with the applicant?
We're still talking. We're still talking.
I feel blessed.
Dennis Weed, 1375 Rodden. It is weird being out here. First of all, to address Councilman Meisner's comments, you only have to meet one of those 4 requirements, and you don't have to be real creative to make one of those fit. I mean, you can certainly say the character of the neighborhood has changed, and that's one of them, or I think one of them is that it improves, it improves the community or something along those lines. I certainly agree with the mayor's comments that that building's been there a lot longer than 2011. And truthfully, even if you denied the zoning, it's not going to change the circumstances. That building and that apartment are still going to stay there. It's, I live 2 blocks away from it. I don't live as close as the mayor does, but I live really close, and I drive by it every single day, dropping my daughter off at school. And, not whether you deny it or approve it, nothing is going to change, except that by approving it, you solve a problem. And I think one of my last comments that I made, or maybe it was my last comment, when I was sitting on that side, was City Council's job is to identify the problem and find the solution. And by God, there's a solution to this problem. And, if you go way back in time, you get to, somebody might say, well, this is a case of spot zoning or whatever. Well, it's not. That's a very unique piece of property because it has no adjacent neighbors. It's an island, and it's the only one like it that I'm aware of. And it is adjacent to R2 property. I just don't see what the problem is. And Dina was absolutely right. If you split that lot, there's no way in the world it'll meet setback requirements. So you're going to have an issue there. If you do approve the zoning, you can still require that it be certified that it meets current building standards and codes, and that a certificate of occupancy is issued if that's what's required. But I mean, really, the R2 zoning is the solution to the problem, and it's not putting an undue burden on anybody.
Mr. Meisner?
Not that we're going to spar here, but I seem to reasonably remember a previous council person being very proactive or reactive to spot zoning in terms of applying a particular zoning individual spot within an existing zoning. Then my next question is, let's make the assumption that we approve this R2. We are then faced with the complication that an existing completed structure has to go through the permitting process. And if that process, if they haven't constructed that building properly, there could potentially be, as you and I both know, a substantial expense involved, and then we're going to have to deal with that problem also. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, if I may, the planner pointed out clearly that when the ADU ordinance was passed in 2011 or whenever it was, that there was a number of properties that were exactly like you have just stated, and that they went through a process to approve those properties as ADUs. So this is not even a unique situation.
I think a possible solution here might be find out when this was put in and see if it was before 2011. I think that's the only thing really that we have that's in question on this.
But even if it was after 2011, I don't think it was, but even if it was, what is that, by denying it, what have you accomplished? Other than just denying it. I mean, you've done nothing to solve a problem. The property's still gonna be sitting there. Unless you're gonna require them to tear it down or deconstruct it, which I have a hard time believing you would do. I mean, just to be 100% clear, I am the world's biggest opponent of the use of the term spot zoning. So just in case there was any confusion there. It's because that's what I was accused of doing, and I was in an almost identical situation. I fought about it for 7 years.
Okay.
Pointlessly. Okay, so
Thank you,
anyhow.
Dennis. Thank you.
Just make it R2.
All right, everyone, where are we going with this?
Well, I just had a question about it being permitted and issued a certificate of occupancy. If it is rezoned, or we do find a way that it is an existing structure on that site, how long of a process is it to get a certificate of occupancy on this piece of property? And if there's somebody currently living there, will they lose the residence while that's happening?
It would be a matter of building inspection, and no, that's usually not something that a person would be evicted for while the inspections were taking place.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
More comments? It's stalemate here. I'm going to close the public hearing, then we have to have a motion.
I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
If we go through this process, since there wasn't a permit, and we do an inspection, exactly what does that entail? Are wires ripped out of the wall to see what kind of coating is on them? Is sheetrock removed so they can tell if it's a 2x4 instead of a 2x6 or whatever is required? How extensive is that process? Dina, I don't know if that's you or Patrick, one of you. How extensive and how detailed and how nitpicky do we get on the construction of a already built and lived in?
Right. The short answer is I don't know.
Okay.
We can follow up obviously with our acting building official and find out what level of inspection that she does when she goes out and tries to retroactively approve these ADUs and get a little more information to you. I guess just offering 2 more bits of information following on some of the discussion that I've heard. The first piece is related to when the structure was built.
Yes.
And when the structure was built may have been prior to 2011, but we don't necessarily know when the ADU was built. So I want you to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was part of the staff report, and one of the things that came out of Planning Commission, is to potentially bring back to Planning Commission actually amending the R1 zoning to allow ADUs without the residency requirement. So that might be something else to consider as part of this, rather than going through a rezoning of this one particular parcel. Is that clear in terms of, so right now,
Yes.
as far as I understand, basically the R1 zone district is the only zone district that has the residency restriction in terms of ADUs. So that is something that could be considered, is to actually change that residency requirement in the R1 zone district.
That's correct.
So
I
just
was on
additional
planning-
options.
I have no idea why that was retained in R1. I thought it was all taken out because I was on planning commission, and it would be almost impossible. You can't, you're going to go door to door and see where the people, who are they, and get their driver's license. It's absurd. I don't think it should be in there personally, but that's just me.
Yeah, and I think the original intent, when the original ADUs ordinance went in place, was in the R1 zone district, which tends to be the larger residential lots, just to assure that there was a split of ownership and that not too many properties were being turned over to rental properties. So I believe that was the underlying concern at that time.
Yeah, that's probably right. Mr. Hamrick?
Well, if that's a reasonable solution,
All right,
I'll give a head nod to that.
okay. Mr. Hamrick?
That's, my question is about that same issue. And my question is it possible to table this request until we have another option presented by staff, which would be a ordinance revision removing the residency requirement for ADU?
Well,
And I'm not sure how complicated that process is or is not, and so.
I would say that's a pleasure of
Well,
council.
And I would probably add to that a second option of just going back to 2 plots and having a special variance for them to have that. I think that'd also be another simple way to address this particular property.
It may not, because the bottom is a garage, and the house, the main house, does not have a garage if that is a separate structure.
And the setbacks were brought in there too. If it was brought into 2 different lots, it probably wouldn't meet the setback requirement.
But it could with a variance.
I live a little closer to this than the mayor does.
Corey?
I think
Under
we oughta
your,
look at the ordinance personally.
under your code provisions related to initiation of amendments to the zoning code, one of the ways that amendments can be initiated is by the city council. So it seems to me that if you wanted to take whatever action you decided to take tonight on the application in front of you, you could also direct that staff initiate an amendment on your behalf to eliminate the residency requirement for R1. You are specifically authorized to initiate that kind of amendment if that is your inclination, and giving that kind of direction tonight is one way to address this.
Mr. Gill?
On a personal level, I don't see a problem anymore with removing the owner occupancy part of it. I don't see where it being there is going to benefit any neighborhoods or anything else. And please, somebody else open for discussion if you feel that maybe I'm in error.
Mayor,
Well,
can I say something?
Yes, Adam.
Because I was here when those were developed, and that's part of that. The reason it's that way for R1 is the presumption for the neighbor of what they're living next to. If you allow an ADU without residency, you've in effect allowed a duplex next door.
Yes.
So someone who buys a house in R1 next to one neighbor should have the expectation it's going to remain that way. The problem with removing the residency then is someone then can capitalize on that R1 lot, build an ADU in the garage, and now those people who bought an R1 lot next door are living next to 2 people. And if that happens on the other side of them, now they're living next to 4 people instead of 2, and it just builds on it like that. So it's based on protecting the neighbor's property rights. That's the reason for that. So with residency, there's enough evidence there that with residency, they take care of the place, and they're there to keep an eye on things, and you don't have 2 partying renters instead of maybe just 1.
I'll buy your philosophy about the fact that the residency would maybe encourage or improve the quality or the upkeeping of the adjacent property, but the ADU could happen on both sides in the current situation. You
It
could
could.
still wind up in an R1 with a viable ADU on both sides of you, having 4 families next to you in the current situation.
Correct, but the presumption is that condition with residency on both sides would be better than no residency on both sides.
Yeah, so I think we need to limit the residency issue to the potential for that lot to not be maintained as well with a resident versus a non-resident.
What?
Well, he's saying that if a guy living in Hawaii, he's not going to take care of his property versus the
Well.
guy that's living there at 604 Yale is going to take care of it.
The evidence is there that that's most of the time is the case.
Yeah, you'll
Comparatively.
find in a lot of our code enforcement problems, or especially our chronic ones, the owners of that property do not live in the state.
I debate with you on that. I don't, that's my business. I don't think so.
I'm just telling you why,
But
whether it's
you
right or
already
wrong.
have found
That was the
thought
why.
was when the ordinance was written.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
You have found
And it's
egregious-
valid. I think your residency justification makes sense.
In fact, if I remember, it was a concession because we were going to not allow them at all in R1. And so the concession was, we'll allow them in R1, but with this condition.
And there were already some already there.
Yeah.
So we had to realize the reality of it.
Right.
And I still think trying to proctor the residency, I think that's.
But
I
it would
think
be
it's
based on
ridiculous.
complaint. So
Well-
if I lived next door and I knew all of a sudden there's two families living there that don't own the place, I
Mhm.
would be calling P&Z saying that there needs to be some enforcement.
But your statement that you can go ahead and build in the garage still has to qualify for setbacks and permits and things of that nature.
Well,
You
but-
can't just up and do it.
But again, it's.
But
you're-
that was your statement.
Unless you're driving by and seeing it, that's
that's
the
not-
issue, is we have someone that's building or converting something without our knowledge. If they had come to us for a permit, it's kind of like another situation we
Mm-hmm.
have. If they had come to us for a permit, they would have been denied. And we wouldn't be in the situation where we have a possible eviction.
There's no floodplain here.
It's close. So, I mean, I would suggest that I would rather see you see this as a special condition, a white elephant in the neighborhood that needs repaired, as Dennis has mentioned, rather than go back to affecting R1 everywhere across the town.
It is strongly unique in that that island is an island, there is nothing around it but streets. You're not going to find that anywhere else in this town. Tell me, I mean, it just isn't.
Yeah, it's a very big lot.
It's a
There's
very
no
big
adjacent
lot,
house.
surrounded by very large streets and a high school on the other side. Look at it, right there.
Yep.
I just don't see a problem with doing this, and I think that they can get the setbacks, and if they want to go ahead and subdivide it, fine. If not, I think we ought to go ahead and approve it, and have them take out the residencies for that particular property.
Mr. Mayor, you know, I'm looking at the planning commission's meetings and everything else. I think we need to look at it this way. We're here to do a job based on what the planning commission did with their hearings. And if you look at the deal there were 3 people in that area that were opposed to changing it from R1 to R2. Okay? These are people that live right
Direct neighbors.
there.
Yep.
These aren't people that live over here and over there. They're right there. And we have to look at their concerns, just like Adam's saying. And I think what we need to do, if we keep looking at trying to find special ways to accommodate people for certain things, we're not doing our job in a sense. You know, that's the purpose for the planning commission. And the planning commission came out and said that this should be denied. So I think we need to go ahead and get this over. Let's make the vote and decide.
Well, okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I did close it. Second closure. And ask for a motion on the rezoning, I guess that's what it is, from council, and a second. Anybody like to make a motion?
And I would just remind council, if the motion is not to follow the planning commission's recommendation, then we would request that you continue consideration of this matter to the first meeting in February so that staff can draft the ordinance approving, which wasn't drafted because planning commission recommended denial. So the two choices are to make a motion to deny based on the planning commission's recommendations and the findings of fact, or to continue to the first meeting in February.
So the two options on the motion. Which motion would you like to go with? Mr. Arquez?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we go along with the planning commission's request and deny the changes from R1 to R2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gill? Any discussion on the motion?
Assuming that we deny this, Do these parties still have options to come before the city? Whatever that may be. I mean, okay.
At least two that were discussed tonight. One is to initiate the same amendment that was discussed about trying to eliminate the residency requirement for R1, and the other is to replat and divide this into 2 lots. So we know of those 2 options.
So a point of order, I guess, Mr. Mayor, is so if the motion fails, we then cannot vote on
Yeah, good point.
The ADU. There'll be no vote on the ADU. It'd be
on
moved.
finding, on approving the rezoning. If the motion fails to uphold the planning commission.
Yeah, where are we at?
That would be.
Then you could still make the motion to continue, because remember, the motion tonight, there's no motion to approve, because there's no ordinance.
Okay,
Does everybody understand that?
yes.
Any other discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Jaquez.
Yes.
Councilmember Gill.
Yes.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Yes.
Councilmember
Yay.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Aye. Councilmember Gonzalez.
No.
Councilmember Smith.
Yay.
Councilmember Meisner.
Nay.
Councilmember Hamrick.
No.
Denied by majority vote.
Okay. I won't go down there. Okay. You can come in and try the other 3.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Zoning request wasn't denied.
The zoning request was not denied.
Yeah, no.
Yes, it was.
It was
Yes, it
denied
was.
on a
The
4-3
motion was
vote.
to deny and uphold the
Findings of fact.
findings
But I
of,
thought you said it failed.
no, uphold, the denial was upheld by majority vote.
The motion carried by a vote of 4-3.
Right.
Yes.
The rezoning failed.
Okay, okay.
So I would tell you to come back with the other options that they are, because I would truly like to work this problem out. And I live there, and I think that's a very unique parcel, and I would hate to see that sit vacant.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
On this thing, even if it doesn't meet the setbacks, could that go to the Board of Adjustments?
Sure.
And then let the Board of Adjustments answer their, what are there, 5 questions on Board of Adjustments?
The Board of Adjustments is the authority that evaluates variance requests for things
They
like
are, aren't they?
There you go.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Okay?
I think
So
the-
there's a couple of steps here that can make it work.
The intent there is to find a solution, but it's, I don't think we're comfortable that the R2 is the current solution.
For the better of everybody in the next situation that comes up.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you. Number 14 is funding request for the Pregnancy Center. Is the applicant here?
I can speak to that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
As you know, the council considers community funding requests every year. Unfortunately, the Canyon City Pregnancy Center missed the deadline this year. They had received funding in the past. What they're requesting from the council, and you still have approximately $13,000 left in that fund, they're requesting $4,000 that would purchase formula and diapers.
Questions?
Didn't we use some of that money for something else already?
Yeah.
I thought I recall a previous
For the
conversation
senior citizens.
where we
I'm
used,
aware
where we
of it. I
took
mean,
that
Harry, do you
money.
recall? We don't recall that.
Yes, it was for the Golden Age Center, $10,000.
We took some of that
No,
money out.
That's separate.
It was
Yeah,
from a
this
different
is-
fund.
Community
That was
fund
out
had
of that.
50,000 and you allocated and appropriated 37,000.
But we took the GAC, the last request from that, out of that
No,
leftover.
that was a separate line item.
That's a separate line item.
Yeah, so those funds are
Okay.
still available technically.
Okay.
So it's your pleasure. If you want diapers and formula.
Well, what was the reasoning for this particular organization to not be able to meet our deadline?
I'm not aware specifically. I do know they've had a lot of change in their leadership and structure. That probably was the reason there was a slippage and they didn't submit their materials on time. That would be my
It didn't occur to
assumption.
them that the end of the year's coming up, that
Not the first organization.
I think we've made exceptions before in this.
Yeah.
And if we do this, I'd like to see that they put their funding request in at the proper time next year as a condition of possibly next year. Does that make sense, Mr. Meisner?
no.
No better
Well,
before
because, I
you-
mean,
you
next year,
brought
we're
it.
gonna do the same thing. And I'll probably vote for it, but we're still gonna
Well,
do
like I
the same
said,
thing.
we've had this situation before where people missed the funding request, and we put that stipulation on them last time, on the other party, I believe. So I think that this is probably a justifiable expenditure or donation, and just let them know that next year, if they don't get it in on time, that they won't get it.
Strike out, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion a second then. Do I have a motion? Mr. Gill.
I make a motion that we approve the funding request from for the pregnancy center for diapers and formula in the amount of $4,000.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hamrick. Would you, any discussion on that motion? Would you call roll, please?
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
And I would like to say, Jim, in your hesitation too, we spent a lot of time and a whole day interviewing, and it would be nice to do it all at once. That
I
was the
know.
Yes,
whole
it would.
purpose of the way that we set it up.
At least refund my vacation day.
There you go.
All right, moving on. We're starting to wear down here. 15, ordinance number 2, series number 2018. This is the first reading. It's an ordinance authorizing city clerk to license special event liquor permits. I will need 3 to introduce that. Mr. Meisner, Mr. Gill, Ms. Schumacher. Thank you. Would you read by title, please?
Oh, this is a long one. This is a bill for ordinance number 2, series of 2018, an ordinance amending Chapter 5.30 of the Canyon City Municipal Code by repealing Section 5.30 and .010, by repealing and reenacting Section 5.03.050, assigning authority to the city clerk regarding special event permits, and adding a new subsection regarding conditions imposed on permits and violations of the city's liquor code.
Any comments or questions from city council? Mr. Hamrick?
Yes, I have a question. Under 5.30.070 on page 2, B in the middle of the page, Liquor Authority, the clerk shall refer to the Liquor Authority. Apparent violations is how I summed that up. In addition, the city clerk may refer to the Liquor Authority when the public interest would best be served by determination by the authority. And so my question is about the difference between the shall and the may, and perhaps, I don't know, Kathy, if you have some information or some experience or that's
That's going to be attorney.
an attorney question, okay. And my question is to you, Corey.
I'll give you an example, just, under Colorado law, 1 DUI is not a disqualifier for a liquor licensee. There's actually a Colorado Supreme Court case that says that. So if the city clerk were to receive that application, my advice to her would be you can approve that administratively, because we know that it's not a disqualifier. We don't have a case yet in Colorado. What if there were 2? And so if there were, for example, a second DUI of the licensee, my advice to the city clerk would be refer this to the licensing authority. That's where the may would fall, because we know that 1, for example, is not a disqualifier. I don't know what the answer is for 2 yet, but I think it's something that is worthy of the licensing authority having the opportunity to make that decision.
Thank you.
And I think it's incumbent on that as well. If the clerk says, "Yeah, this is really, I'd like to bring it to city council," he or she certainly can do that.
Precisely.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Okay?
It's kind of what we do on renewals now.
Sure.
Comment.
Mr. Meisner?
I'll make it quick.
Thank
I
you.
sincerely appreciate item G on page 4, that addresses, oh, wait a minute, that's not, item H, I think. Oh, hell, where is it?
Get your items right.
You have right, G.
We're on ordinance too, Mr.
To
Meisner.
serve- to
Oh,
serve.
yeah.
D, D, is what you want.
Item D.
It shall be unlawful for any employee out, D. That's what you want.
And I appreciate that verbiage being inserted in there, having worked more community events than I would please to know.
Yes.
But the point is, are we going to make some effort to make for sure that those new organizations are now aware of that new requirement?
I will be sending notices as soon as you adopt this. I didn't send any notice out to anybody until you guys said, didn't make any changes on first reading. This will go out to all licensees probably in the morning.
Okay. I'm going to put you on a timer, Mr. Meisner.
I'm done.
No, sorry. Okay. Can I have a motion in a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I make a motion that we approve on first reading ordinance 2, series of 2018.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion?
Frankly.
I'm just grateful for it.
What?
I think it'll really help streamline city
Did you have a
councils.
comment, Frank?
No, I did the second.
Oh, you did the second.
The
Thank you.
only thing I'll comment is I have one application in. I will give them their choice whether they want to come before council. It's going to fall right in there before this second reading. So you may hear one more,
Okay.
if they so choose to go through the pain.
Okay,
Okay. Well, thank you.
I appreciate the change.
Any discussion on the motion?
Not a one.
Would you call a roll, please?
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Three left hand.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to number 16. It's ordinance number 3, series 2018. This is a first reading. It's an ordinance amending Title 17. I will need 3 to introduce. Mr. Gill, Ms. Hamrick, Mr. Hamrick, rather, and Ms. Schumacher. Would you read by title, please?
This is a bill for ordinance number 3, series of 2018, an ordinance amending various sections of Title 17 of the Canyon City Municipal Code related to junkyard shipping container screening and maintenance of display lots.
Thank you. Dina, would you like to give us a report?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. So this item, if you read through your staff reports for particularly the newer members of council, dates back to late 2016. So I can answer more questions about that history, but to give a brief summary, the last time council met on this was November 8th at a general government meeting and discussed the draft ordinance at that time. And based on input and comment from council, the 3 changes were made that you see on the one-page staff report that I've submitted to you. So the first item, basically in section 1 of the ordinance, the definition of accessory structure or use, the word rented has been inserted to clarify that. That was one of the concerns that came out of the general government meeting. Number 2, again, in the definitions, a clarification on the definition of intermodal shipping container. The word container was added to clarify that versus a rail car itself. I don't think want rail cars themselves in some of these districts. So the word container was added. And the third clarification or update that was made from the version presented on 11/8 was that the MH1 and CBD districts have been removed as accepted zone districts. So those 3 changes were made based on the comments that came to staff from council at that 11/8 meeting, and that updated version is the ordinance that you see this evening.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Mr.
Thank
Meisner.
you.
Thank you, Dina.
I thought we had a discussion about section 1, accessory structure, and the term, or at least the length of the term of 45 days. And correct me if I'm wrong, but based upon this current ordinance, the construction crew at St. Thomas More would be in violation of this ordinance if they were to start this construction after this ordinance were passed, and that those containers that they have out there in that lot for more than 45 days. Is that correct? Yes.
Are permitted in all centers for short-term storage.
I thought we had allowance for
So-
active building.
Yeah, I thought we
Yeah,
had a
if they were
for-
actively building,
Building
there was an allowance
permitted.
for that.
Okay, where's it at? My point is, I can,
We're not trying to restrict, we understand that pods potentially or shipping container-like units might be on site for longer than 45 days for large construction projects. That, we're not trying to restrict that. The intent is to make sure that they don't, aren't permitted or sitting in front yards for more than 45 days.
This is definition of
So-
accessory structure. So the devices you're talking about at the hospital are, no one's saying that they're an accessory structure.
Right.
They're accessory to that construction project. So this is in definition.
Right, and the intent here was restricting it to 45 days was, say, folks that are moving, right? And you get a pod-like structure, you rent one, have it come on site, you have time to load your belongings and get it moved. That was the intent of having the word rented clarified and added into that specific definition of accessory structure or use.
I bet if you look at the definition, an accessory structure includes garages, sheds, barns, blah, 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 blah.
I'm not sure that on a construction site that it would be considered an accessory structure.
Right.
Yeah, but when you look at the definition of an accessory structure, it doesn't talk about construction sites.
Don't need to.
No, I think the idea is by definition, an accessory use is accessory to a principal use. And when you're talking about construction, there's no principal use at that time. The idea is that it is an entirely different set of circumstances. So I think Adam's absolutely right. By placing the 45-day limitation in the accessory use definition, it has to be a use that is accessory to the principal use. And storage, for example, could be accessory to the principal use, but it would be limited to 45 days under this definition.
Yes.
So this prevents someone from saying the pod is my shed, because a shed is an accessory structure.
Correct.
This says no. But no one's coming to us and saying, well, we're going to keep these here indefinitely at the hospital as accessory structures.
And those construction structures, for example, are also tied to a building permit, which has a limited life. Again, as we talked about earlier, the 6-month term is if there's no construction being done. So they're limited by definition and not accessory by definition.
Okay, any other comments?
I do that.
Well, you have a second reading. This is the first reading.
Doesn't matter
If
how
you
many
have,
readings we got, that kinda help me. Thank you.
okay.
Mr.
Anyone
Mayor?
else? Yes, ma'am.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 3, series of 2018 upon first reading.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill? Aye. Councilmember Meisner?
Nay.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Approved by
Okay.
majority vote.
Thank you, Dina.
Thanks, Dina.
Okay, number 17, ordinance number 4, series number of 2018. This is, again, a first reading. It's an ordinance amending section 13.08.045 and deleting section 13.4.04.55. I need 3 to introduce. Ms. Smith, Ms. Gonzalez, and Mr. Hamrick. Get the new people in here. Thank you. Would you read by title, please?
This is a bill for ordinance number 4, series of 2018, and ordinance amending section 13.08.045 and deleting section 13.04.155 of the Canyon City Municipal Code concerning the abandonment of water tap permits and water taps.
Okay. Does everybody understand what's going on here? Any comments from council?
Oh, sure. Got a
Mr. Mar-
question.
Yes.
On section, or item C, Adam probably answers this, I don't know. Last sentence, that says, "The owner of the property where previously valid tap was abandoned shall be treated as an applicant for new service for all purposes under this chapter if such owner seeks to have service restored." What does that mean?
That means they have to buy a new tap.
If they've been refunded, correct?
No, so section C has to do with someone who's in default. We took our permit back from them because they wouldn't pay. That section's not changing, it's just included in the existing section. That's not something we're
Pre-existing.
creating.
So in other words, they have a tap, but they never paid.
They have a tap, they won't pay their bill, we take our tap back and disconnect them. If they ever want to come back, they have to pay.
But they paid for their original tap, they're just not paying their water bill.
Correct.
But it mentions in here somewhere that the fact that you can pay that past due amount? Does that not mention that in here somewhere?
Only within that within those 12 months.
12 months, so I
Yeah.
can be default for 12 months
Right.
and pay the
Pay the
back due?
And the percentage interest and administrative costs associated with that.
So explain the logic to me as to, I can understand the past due.
Okay.
But explain the logic to me as to why we're going to charge them for another tap.
Because, let's say, again, it's based on the reason why we don't want people speculating and buying a bunch of taps anyways. We're obligating the system. So you don't want someone that says, okay, I'm not gonna pay my water bill, and I'm gonna have this dilapidated house that Ashley's committee's worked for and they've torn down and we've taken our tap back. And then 6 years later, they say, well, we had a tap, we want that back. And in theory, we've sold that tap already to somebody
No,
else.
you shouldn't have though, because according to your plans, each one of those taps builds the system.
Right, but we took that tap away. We're not collecting revenue for it anymore.
So it gets moved to a new.
I mean, part of it's a punitive investment, I mean, an incentive as well. I mean, it is. You can either do that or change it so you charge them $5,000 default. Same difference.
What's a water tap cost?
$5,000 for a 3/4 inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mostly, it's a penalty to pay your water fee, or your sewer company does it, they're gonna dig up your sewer.
I can tell you it's an incentive
Shut
that's
up.
worked because since we've done this, we haven't had one of these since our initial flush of the system, where we had a bunch of these that we kind of had to push to get our money back. I don't know that we've had one since.
The only ones that when homes get foreclosed on, sometimes, right now, it can go over a year. So there might be a slight.
And those ones, we have an administrative policy, if the water department has not been out there yet, it's not a priority for them to go out and disconnect. So if they have not yet disconnected in the street, we allow them to slide back in with no penalty.
What do you mean by disconnect?
Actually disconnect the pipe from ours.
I mean, if the pipe's disconnected, if the tap is physically disconnected, I can buy that.
That's the condition.
That's what they do.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
do cap it off. Sewer does it too.
You're capping it off at the pipe or at the meter pit?
At the water main, disconnecting
Okay.
at the water main. We're
So
digging
they'll-
up the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you paying the street restoration fee too?
Yes, they are.
Just checking.
A lot, yes, they are.
Unlike some.
Okay,
Few.
we're going sideways again.
Okay, Mr.
All right,
Mayor.
yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 4, series of 2018, upon first reading.
And second.
Any discussion on that motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you. Let's move on to ordinance number 5, series 2018. This is again a first reading. It's an ordinance amending section 8.80.020, parentheses 8, period. I need 3 to introduce. Mr. Hamrick, thank you. Mr. Gill, Ms. Gonzalez, thank you. Get your name on the record there. Would you read by title, please?
This is a bill for ordinance number 5, series of 2018, an ordinance amending section 8.80.0208 of the Canyon City Municipal Code to designate the Board of Adjustment as the appropriate body to hear and decide appeals and variances from the city's floodplain regulations.
Thank you. Did we have a report, Adam, or not?
I was told this was your idea, or someone's idea on city council. So-
And I don't even get a vote.
No, I think surrounding the discussion at the last appeals that we had, someone asked the question of why this doesn't go to board adjustment or the way similar land use issues do. So the attorneys prepared this, and staff is okay with it if that's your pleasure.
It was brought up why we were deciding what would be flood plain appeals and what wouldn't, and
Right.
I think this is a very good thing, thank you.
It was about the only thing that didn't go to the board. It should. And then if it has to come council, it can.
Right.
But-
How would it get? to
No,
council?
anything that goes
Oh,
beyond.
sorry, no, you're right, you're
Board
right.
adjustments goes to district
That's it.
court.
Right.
District court.
But I think the issue is that the floodplain ordinance was the only variance
Right.
that went to city council and didn't go to the Board of Adjustment for final decision.
That makes sense.
They're trained for that, they're equipped for that, and they do an excellent job.
They do. Okay.
They've never seen one, how would we know?
For their other appeals, they do
Oh.
an excellent
Yes.
job.
We'll get them trained.
Very thorough.
Yeah, pretty good.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 5, series of 2018 upon first reading.
Can I have a second? Mr. Gill, any discussion on the motion? Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Number 19 is approve the city administrator's 2018 work plan. Could we have a report from the city administrator?
Very briefly,
Thank
this is
you.
a 20-point work objective plan for council's consideration. If you wish to modify anything, we'll accept that. But fairly comprehensive, dealing with everything from financial management to operations to capital projects and everything else in between. And all these items would be reflected in your upcoming 2018 business plan.
Okay. Everybody has seen the point by point? We're going to move on. Comments from council?
Sure. These objectives would be inserted into the agreement, or no?
Yes, there'll be an attachment to the agreement.
The way the agreement is structured now, the work plan, so that it's more flexible, doesn't
Right.
require an amendment to the agreement, it just requires your approval each year, and it essentially becomes part of the agreement when you approve the work plan.
Then my specific question would be, is how do we evaluate, in particular, item number 19?
Thought you'd ask that, because that was specifically drafted for you.
Sorry.
I think at the end of the day, it's a function of what the customer thinks is an improvement. One of our current struggles is trying to identify what the issues and challenges are. If we can get a better handle on that, I think we can better optimize the process. So working with the council and the community, particularly the contractors, I hope we can get a better idea of how we can improve that building permit process. And ultimately, they should be the arbiters of whether we've done a good job or not. So chat with that constituency and those stakeholders.
Any other questions?
I don't think I see anything on here as far as we have been talking about having a committee or a group to go over the building code itself, especially pertaining to older buildings. Does that need to be a separate item?
I mean, the
to
council certainly on
accomplish?
its own, we have, you had originally talked about creating a committee. The council withdrew that interest. We're still open to that. That could certainly relate to number 19, but I think left alone, 19 needs to be addressed. We should improve, given some of the adverse feedback you, council members, have received. We wish to improve that process for those customers.
Mr. Gill?
In this thing, it's like we were looking at having a committee review all of the codes, And I think that the direction we're taking now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to get the input from the people that these codes affect and
Yes.
find out where the problems are and address the problems rather than the entire code.
True.
Is that a safe assumption? or
Yeah, if we can
safe,
get a better
observation?
diagnosis, we can come up with a better remedy.
We need to know what the problems are to correct the problems, rather than say, okay, we're going to try to correct the problems in the whole code book.
Yeah.
Or, make differences there.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about a huge parameter. I think the last time, I didn't feel as if we had enough structure to what we were going to ask for. Just ask.
You're correct.
It's a huge thing, and so we probably ought to have a vision or general government have that discussion, make it so that it puts the bones on it, so we know where we're going and how that's going to look, and then who would go on that and invite them in that fashion.
So I
Just makes
guess,
sense.
yeah, I would like to see maybe number 21 to address that, to find out what those issues are, where we want to address, and as far as building codes, in particular to older buildings
So-
and businesses.
So you would want to have it at another, not a council meeting, but at a vision or general government meeting discussion. Is that what you're saying?
No, for 21, that's something that will happen in year 2018, that's going to occur. It could be in a vision committee or we'll need to meet with businesses probably and owners. I've talked to them downtown. They would like to sit and talk about some of the problems of codes and how to comply with
Yeah.
safety. And that we accomplish that. That's, I want to make sure that gets accomplished, and whether city council looks at it or maybe we ask the planning commission to take that on.
We concur, but we think 19 covers that. It addresses process and then improvements. So what you're describing is a potential process. If the council wishes to pursue that process, we'll embrace that. And we're just wanting to get the input necessary to make improvements to that process and to the outcomes that the stakeholders who are affected by the building permit process desire. So,
I'm going to publicly state that I don't fundamentally have a problem with the verbiage of 19.
yeah.
As you and I both know, my fundamental problem states with the process. I don't want to get into this.
Interpretation of the code?
Our inspection process needs to change. I'll just say that.
And we're open to that, but we want to know what needs to change, and we don't have clarity on that. We haven't had sufficient, constituent input on that. We don't want to just throw darts at a board. We want to be focused on what the needs of particularly the contractors are, and I understand some of maybe the reluctance for them to come forward, but if there's a process you can embrace that would get us that feedback, we're open to making the changes that will meet and correct their concerns.
I don't think you are, but we'll leave it at that.
Well,
My next question is,
Jim, you're talking about, try to narrow it down so that it's understandable and have a system of doing it. Really. And
you've
then-
been involved in some of the inspections that go on in this city, so you and I don't need to have this discussion.
Okay, we don't, but I'm just saying, make it simple.
My next question is fundamentally, how do we quantify, I guess, each of those things? For example, number 13, is that an all or nothing deal on each of those that aren't identified as we did on the
These
other
are
plan?
minimal thresholds that have to be met.
So each one, and we would do the same process, I assume, that we would establish a percentage achievable, and then each of these would have that same percentage, and we would take the percentage of achievement and average those,
Yeah, I think the methodology you developed for last year would be appropriate.
other than last year we had 1% and 2%.
Yes.
This would be 3%.
We're thinking at 10, 20%.
No.
Okay.
Whatever the council desires, you can apply those, and Jim, and you've lost your other partners, maybe some other council member wants to join Jim, could then articulate what those percentages are and what the trigger points are for certain rewards. And that, I think, is a fair, equitable system.
Okay, I'm going to call for a motion. Are we about done?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the city administrator's 2018 work plan.
Do I have have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gonzalez, second. Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Call roll, please.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, I'll need a motion for going to an executive session for the purpose of discussing municipal judges' evaluation and contract. I'll need a motion, a second.
Mr.
Meisner.
Mayor,
Thank
council,
you.
I move the city council hold an executive session to consider personal matters pursuant to CRS 24-6-2 or 4024F, period.
You want a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Call roll, please.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, we will then adjourn to executive session. Private room back there.